The gravel crunched under the tires of the BMW as it came to a stop outside Sunset Meadows Mobile Home Park, a place that had seen better days sometime in the previous century. Linda Patterson, 77 years old and clutching a single suitcase, stepped out of the passenger seat and stared at the rusted aluminum box that her son Kevin had just informed her would be her new home. "It's perfect for you, Mom," Kevin said without looking at her, his voice carrying the false enthusiasm of someone trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. "Quiet neighborhood, low maintenance, and the rent is really affordable." But Linda could see the truth in his averted eyes, and the way he kept his engine running, ready for a quick escape. This wasn't about her comfort or financial practicality. This was about Kevin's new wife, Stephanie, a former beauty queen who had made it abundantly clear that having an elderly mother-in-law around was incompatible with the image she was cultivating as an up-and-coming real estate agent in the city's most exclusive neighborhoods. Linda had become an inconvenience, a reminder of Kevin's humble origins that needed to be hidden away where Stephanie's wealthy clients would never see her. The bitter irony wasn't lost on Linda. For 55 years, she had sacrificed everything to give Kevin opportunities she had never had. She had worked 3 jobs simultaneously, cleaning offices at night, doing laundry for wealthy families during the day, and taking in sewing work on weekends, all to pay for Kevin's private school education and college tuition. She had sold her mother's engagement ring to buy Kevin his first car. She had mortgaged the small house she and her late husband had worked decades to pay off, using the money to finance Kevin's first business venture. When Kevin's marriage to his college sweetheart fell apart, Linda had emptied her retirement savings to help him through the expensive divorce. And now, when Linda was finally too old to work and needed support herself, Kevin had decided she was too much of a burden to bear. The solution was to stash her away in this forgotten corner of the world where she could decline in privacy, out of sight and out of mind. The trailer Kevin had rented for her was a 1970s model that looked like it had been through several natural disasters and lost each time. The aluminum siding was dented and streaked with rust. The windows were cracked and held together with duct tape, and the wooden steps leading to the front door sagged ominously under even her modest weight. Inside, the trailer was a monument to decades of neglect. The carpet was stained beyond recognition. The paneling on the walls was warped from water damage, and the appliances looked like museum pieces from an era when avocado green was considered stylish. The whole space smelled of mold, old cigarette smoke, and defeat. Linda sat on the edge of a couch that had clearly been left by previous tenants and felt the full weight of her abandonment settle over her like a heavy blanket. At 77 years old, after a lifetime of putting everyone else's needs before her own, she had been discarded like old furniture. But Linda Patterson had not survived nearly 8 decades of life by giving up when things got difficult. She had lived through the Great Recession, her husband's death from cancer, multiple job losses, and countless smaller tragedies that had tested her resilience. If Kevin thought this place would break her spirit, he was about to learn how strong she really was. The first night in the trailer park was an education in the sounds of poverty. Through the thin walls, Linda could hear babies crying, couples arguing, teenagers playing music too loud, and the general cacophony of people living too close together with too few resources. But she also heard something else. The sounds of people trying to make the best of difficult circumstances. The next morning, Linda ventured outside to explore her new environment. What she found challenged every assumption she had made about trailer parks and the people who lived in them. Instead of the hopeless community of losers she had expected, Linda discovered a neighborhood full of working families, elderly couples on fixed incomes, and young people saving money while they worked toward better situations. She met Betty, a retired nurse who had moved to the park after her pension proved insufficient to cover both her medications and rent in a regular apartment. She encountered Frank, a veteran who was using his disability benefits to slowly build a small business repairing appliances for his neighbors. She discovered that the park's manager, Maria, was actually a single mother working 2 jobs who had turned the community center into an informal resource hub where residents could access job listings, share childcare responsibilities, and organize bulk purchasing to reduce grocery costs. These people had every reason to be bitter about their circumstances, to surrender to the limitations of their environment, to accept that they were somehow failures who deserved their situation. Instead, Linda found a community of resilient individuals who looked out for each other, shared what little they had, and refused to let their housing situation define their worth as human beings. "You are new here, honey," Betty said on Linda's 3rd day, offering her a cup of coffee from a thermos as they sat on the park's single picnic table. "Where are your people?" Linda briefly explained her situation, being careful not to reveal too much about Kevin's success or her own former financial circumstances. She simply said her son had thought she would be happier living independently in a community of peers. Betty nodded with the wisdom of someone who had heard similar stories before. "Ah, I see. Sometimes our children think they know what's best for us better than we do ourselves. But you know what I learned? Sometimes the place they think is good enough for us turns out to be exactly where we needed to be." Those words planted a seed in Linda's mind that would grow into something remarkable. For 50 years, she had defined herself entirely through her relationships with other people. As a wife, then a widow, then a mother. But who was Linda Patterson when stripped of those roles? What could she accomplish when she had only herself to rely on? The answer began to emerge when Linda started paying attention to the daily challenges her fellow residents faced. Many of them were struggling with problems that seemed insurmountable because they lacked information, resources, or simply someone with enough experience to help them navigate complex systems. Linda watched Frank struggle with paperwork for his disability benefits, forms that were deliberately confusing and designed to discourage claims. She saw young mothers overwhelmed by the bureaucracy involved in accessing childcare assistance or food stamps. She observed elderly residents being taken advantage of by contractors who assumed they were too old or too poor to know when they were being cheated. Linda had navigated all of these systems during her working years. She had helped her husband deal with VA benefits, manage their family's finances through multiple economic downturns, and learned to advocate effectively for herself and others when dealing with government agencies and service providers. When she heard Mrs. Rodriguez crying about a Social Security mix-up that had resulted in her monthly check being suspended, Linda knocked on her door with a notebook and pen. "Excuse me, dear, but I couldn't help overhearing your problem. I have some experience with Social Security issues. Would you mind if I took a look at your paperwork?" Mrs. Rodriguez was skeptical that anyone could help with her seemingly hopeless situation, but desperation made her willing to try. Linda spent 2 hours carefully reviewing documents, making phone calls, and filling out forms with the precision of someone who understood bureaucratic language. 3 weeks later, Mrs. Rodriguez not only had her benefits restored, but received a check for all the payments she had missed. Word of Linda's success spread quickly through the small community. "Mrs. Linda, how did you know how to fix this?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked, tears of relief in her eyes. "When you are poor, you learn to fight for every dollar you are entitled to," Linda replied simply. "The system is designed to wear you down, but it works if you know how to make it work." By the end of her first month in the trailer park, Linda had helped 4 families navigate various bureaucratic challenges, saved 3 residents from being overcharged by unscrupulous repair services, and assisted 2 young mothers in accessing hives, educational programs they hadn't known existed. Linda discovered that her decades of life experience had given her something more valuable than money: the knowledge of how to get things done in a world that seemed designed to prevent people from succeeding. But more importantly, she realized that helping others gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. During her last decade of living with Kevin, she had felt increasingly useless, like a burden rather than a contributor. Here in the trailer park, her skills and knowledge were not just appreciated, but desperately needed. Linda began to formalize her assistance, setting up unofficial office hours in the community center where residents could bring their problems and get help navigating solutions. She created simple guides explaining how to deal with common bureaucratic challenges, written in plain language that anyone could understand. Word of Linda's advocacy work began to spread beyond the trailer park. Other low-income housing communities heard about the woman who could help people get the benefits and services they were entitled to, and requests for assistance started coming from across the city. Linda realized she had accidentally discovered a business opportunity. There were thousands of people who needed help navigating complex systems, but couldn't afford to hire lawyers or professional advocates. She could fill that gap, providing services at reasonable rates while helping people who had nowhere else to turn. Linda used her modest savings to get proper training and certification as a benefits advocate. She learned about new programs and services, studied changes in regulations, and developed relationships with caseworkers and administrators who could help expedite legitimate claims. Within 6 months, Linda had transformed her trailer into a small but efficient business office. She had installed a separate phone line, purchased a computer and printer, and created filing systems to track her clients' cases. The front room of her trailer became a waiting area where people could sit comfortably while she reviewed their situations. Linda's client base grew rapidly through word of mouth. She helped disabled veterans access benefits they hadn't known were available. She assisted elderly residents in getting home modification grants that allowed them to age in place safely. She guided young families through the maze of programs designed to help them become self-sufficient. Most remarkably, Linda discovered she had a natural talent for business that had been dormant for 7 decades. She understood how to price her services fairly, how to manage cash flow, and how to reinvest profits into growing her capabilities. She hired Betty as a part-time assistant, teaching her how to handle initial client interviews and basic paperwork. The transformation of Linda's trailer from a symbol of abandonment into a thriving business hub became the talk of the mobile home park. Where there had once been shame and resignation, there was now pride and possibility. Linda had shown her neighbors that their circumstances did not define their potential. But the most remarkable change was in Linda herself. The bent, defeated woman who had been dumped in the trailer park had been replaced by someone who walked with purpose, spoke with authority, and commanded respect from everyone she met. She had discovered that at 77 years old, she was not too old to start over. She was not too old to succeed. She was not too old to matter. Linda expanded her services to include tax preparation, help with insurance claims, and guidance for small business startups. She partnered with local nonprofits to bring services directly into underserved communities. She testified at city council meetings about policies affecting low-income residents, becoming a respected voice for people who usually had no voice at all. By her first anniversary in the trailer park, Linda had built something she never could have imagined. A successful business that generated enough income to support not only her own comfortable lifestyle, but also employ 3 part-time staff members from the community. The Linda Patterson Advocacy Service had helped over 300 families access more than $2 million in benefits and services they were entitled to but hadn't known how to obtain. Linda had become a pillar of multiple communities, a resource that people depended on, and a success story that inspired others. But perhaps most importantly, Linda had discovered that being abandoned by Kevin was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of the most meaningful chapter of her life. 9 months after Kevin had dumped her in the trailer park, Linda received a visit that would test everything she had learned about her own worth and capabilities. A silver BMW pulled into the gravel driveway next to Linda's trailer, looking as out of place in the mobile home park as a diamond in a coal mine. Kevin emerged wearing his most expensive suit, clearly attempting to make a statement about his success and status. though he looked distinctly uncomfortable in the humble surroundings. Linda watched through her office window as Kevin approached her trailer, stepping carefully around mud puddles and avoiding eye contact with the neighbors who observed his progress with curiosity. She knew this moment would come eventually. Word of her success had been spreading throughout the city, and it was only a matter of time before Kevin heard about it. When Kevin knocked on her door, Linda opened it immediately. She had been expecting him for weeks, and was completely prepared for this encounter. But she was not the same woman he had abandoned 9 months earlier. Linda was dressed professionally, in a business suit she had purchased with her own earnings. Her hair was styled, her makeup was perfect, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who knew her worth was not dependent on anyone else's opinion. Behind her, Kevin could see an office space that was clearly thriving, with phones ringing, papers organized efficiently, and the buzz of productive work. "Hello, Kevin," Linda said calmly, not inviting him inside. "What brings you to my neighborhood?" Kevin looked around nervously, clearly overwhelmed by the sounds and activity of the trailer park. "Mom, I heard you were doing some kind of work here. I came to check on you and see if you needed anything." Linda smiled, but there was no warmth in it. This was the smile of someone who had found her power and was not afraid to use it. "Check on me? How thoughtful. It only took you 9 months to remember I existed. Mom, please." "I know things got off to a rough start, but I always planned to make sure you were okay. I just wanted to give you time to adjust to your new independence." "Independence," Linda repeated, her voice carrying a note of irony. "Is that what you call abandoning your mother in a trailer park? I suppose that's one way to look at it." Kevin flinched at the directness of her response. This was not the grateful, submissive mother he remembered. This woman had steel in her voice and fire in her eyes, and she was clearly not impressed by his expensive clothes or apologetic tone. "Look, Mom, I know you're upset, but I did what I thought was best. You said you wanted to live independently, and I found you an affordable place where you could do that. I had no idea you would start some kind of business? Linda laughed, a sound without humor. "Kevin, I have built a successful advocacy service that helps hundreds of families access resources they need to survive and thrive. I employ people from this community and generate more income now than I ever did when I was working 3 jobs to pay for your education." For the first time, Kevin really looked at his mother and her surroundings. The trailer may have been old, but it was immaculately maintained and efficiently organized. The sound of productive work was constant, and there was an obvious atmosphere of respect and purpose that he hadn't expected to find in this environment. "But Mom, this place, it's not appropriate for someone of your background. I could find you somewhere more suitable now. Somewhere that matches your new success." Linda looked at her son with something that might have been pity. "Kevin, this place is perfect for me. Not because it's all I deserve, but because it's where I discovered what I was really capable of when I stopped living my life for other people's approval." She gestured toward the busy trailer park around them. "Every person in this community is stronger, more hopeful, and more successful because of work we have done together. Can you say the same about anything in your life?" Kevin tried a different approach. "Mom, I made some mistakes. I admit that. But we are family. I want to make things right between us. I can help you move somewhere more appropriate for your new status." "Let me stop you right there," Linda said firmly. "The time for you to make things right was 9 months ago, when you had a choice between your mother's well-being and your wife's social ambitions. You made your choice, and I made mine." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I chose to build something meaningful with people who value what I bring to their lives. You chose to hide me away so I wouldn't embarrass your brand. Those choices have consequences. Kevin attempted one final manipulation. But you're my mother. My mother. That has to count for something. I can take care of you properly now. Linda stepped closer to her son, close enough that he could see the absolute certainty in her aged eyes. Kevin, you have never taken care of me. I took care of you for 55 years. And the moment I needed support, you threw me away like garbage. But you did me the biggest favor of my life. She gestured toward her thriving business operation. If you hadn't abandoned me here, I never would have discovered that I had talents and abilities that I never got to use while I was busy serving your needs. I never would have learned that at 77 years old I could still build something important and meaningful. Linda stepped back and began to close her door. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you for giving me the chance to discover who Linda Patterson really is when she is not just somebody's mother. Thank you for forcing me to find my own worth instead of depending on your approval for validation. The door closed with a finality that echoed through the quiet trailer park. Kevin stood there for a moment, staring at the simple aluminum door, listening to the sounds of the thriving business his mother had built in the place he had intended to be her exile. When he finally turned and walked back to his car, his shoulders were bent with the weight of understanding what he had lost. He had thrown away the guidance and support of the strongest person he had ever known, and he would never get another chance to benefit from her wisdom. Linda watched through her window as the BMW pulled away, leaving only dust in its wake. She felt no satisfaction in Kevin's obvious discomfort, no joy in his realization of what he had thrown away. But she felt something more valuable. The absolute certainty that she had found her true calling and her real family. She turned back to her work, where Betty was helping a new client understand their Social Security options, where Frank was teaching a young father how to repair his own appliances, where Maria was coordinating a job fair for trailer park residents. This was her legacy now. Not the ungrateful son she had raised, but the community she had helped to empower. At 77 years old, Linda had learned that home is not about the structure you live in, but about the people who value your contributions and the work that gives your life meaning. The woman who had been thrown away had become the heart of a movement, and that was a success that no amount of money or social status could diminish.